right, well, let me welcome everybody real quickly here. Good afternoon. Thanks to those of you who've joined us, and welcome to our third breakout session of the afternoon. Hope you've enjoyed the day so far, and I know that we've had a lot of great engaging sessions so far. My mind's already swimming with all the great information. I can't wait to get to the session that we are starting right now. But I want to let you know that we're kind of flipping the script on this particular session. I know the presenters that we have today really wanted to have an interactive and conversational approach. So you'll notice that you have a little bit more permissions and a little bit more navigational ability in your Zoom window than you have had in any other breakout sessions. The chat feature, which has up to up till now only been limited to presenters, you'll be able to utilize that chat feature, and what you can do is utilize that to vent a little bit. What we're going to be talking about today is how hard that COVID-19 has hit many of us, and all of our workforces and our workplaces look very different than they did even 6-7 months ago, and that's hard. So I think that today is going to be an opportunity for some venting. And it's going to be an opportunity for you to have some open dialogue with two professionals that can help you with some strategies and addressing some of the challenges that have come about as a result of COVID-19 and other challenges. So you also have the ability to, at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a little hand emoji, and it allows you to raise your hand virtually, which will allow you to actually speak and be able to interact with our presenters today. Haven't been able to do that up till now, so we are excited for everybody to have this opportunity, and I'm very excited to welcome our speakers today. First, we have Ken Mall, who has more than 25 years of leadership experience working with top-tier companies, labor organizations, and government agencies, and he's working to identify the skill needs of those workforces and developing and implementing solutions to meet those needs. His vision and expertise in workforce development have helped organizations with notable growth in their technical skills of their skilled workers. Ken has been involved with industry sector related projects across the country, including statewide projects in Pennsylvania and Indiana, of course, Michigan, and regional projects in Ohio, Illinois, Georgia, New York, Washington, California, and Utah. So he's been a traveling man, but probably not quite as much in recent months. We're also joined by Chuck Mouranie, and he is a certified Six Sigma black belt with over 38 years of experience in manufacturing, operations, engineering, and program management. Within the automotive, consumer goods, food, logistics, construction, and green industries, he's made extensive use of lean enterprise methods and Six Sigma tools to improve commercial contracts, inventory systems, organization structures, and manufacturing proficiency. He's assisted multiple companies through court-ordered bankruptcy. He's a board member of 3 privately held companies, a published author and guest lecturer of turnaround strategies for small and mid-market businesses, and a board member of the Turnaround Management Association and American Bankruptcy Institute. So it is my honor and my pleasure to welcome Chuck and Ken for today's very interactive session.
Wow, we can see your screen.
Thanks. I know it's working, and thank you. And thanks, Delaney, for that introduction. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is great. We're looking forward to this session. Again, as Delaney had kind of described, this is a very interactive session. So it looks like we have, right around 12, 15 folks joining us today. And we really do hope to hear from you. So, find where that mute button is and be prepared to take that mute button off, because we want this to be interactive. We want to share our experiences with you. So the title for our session today, Open for Business, Now What? Managing a different kind of workforce crisis. And in a little bit, we'll kind of get into some thoughts that we have about that. But, Chuck and I have been with EDSI for a very long time. And when this, we're consultants and we work with businesses. Chuck works on business strategy and Lean Six Sigma and turnaround work with companies. And I work on workforce development issues with companies. And when this whole COVID-19 hit, we both kind of put our heads together. It's like, this is just a unique thing that we've got to work with, and not only work with our clients. We learned a lot from working with our own company. EDSI is a company of 800 people. We operate over 50 offices in 8 different states. So when you think about trying to manage workers being in a physical location or not being in a physical location, working from remote, it's just, there were a lot of challenges that we as a company had to overcome as well. So through our own experiences, we've learned a lot from that. And we want to share those with you today. So see if I can adjust the slides here. So again, Chuck Mouranie and Ken Mall, happy to be here today.
Hey, we look different. Wait a minute, back up. We look different.
Yes, we do.
I think it must be that COVID beard that we've got.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Like fine wine, gentlemen, like fine wine.
Okay. You notice,
Yeah,
hey, Delaney, you notice they're both gray, right?
We've all got that going on.
Yeah, thank you. So, and we've worked over the years with a lot of companies, and this is just a sampling of the companies we worked with. And obviously this is a manufacturing conference, and you're all manufacturers or serve the manufacturing industry here, but we have worked across the spectrum with service companies, transit agencies, utility companies. So, what we do, applies a broad range across companies. And a lot of these companies we have also been advising throughout this pandemic experience. I think Delaney already kind of explained the instructions for today, so I'm not going to spend some time here. But again, feel free. This is really intended to be a participative opportunity today. We really want to talk with you. So our objectives for today, our goal is really to, work with you to identify some unforeseen challenges you've experienced related to bringing your workforce back during this pandemic. Some of you maybe have already done that. Others of you are thinking about it. Maybe you've got a limited workforce, or some of your workers have come back. So I think it's really a challenge. The worst case is maybe some of your workers have and some of your workers haven't. You have to manage that. We want to share some solutions with you to uncover, to overcoming some of these unforeseen challenges. So, even in our operations with our offices, we have the best intentions, a well laid out plan, well thought out. We go to implement, and then something happens, right? So, share with you some of our experience of how we've dealt with that, how we've advised some of our clients, and then hear from you about some of your unforeseen experiences, and maybe we can talk through some of those. What are some of the unforeseen operational impacts? You say you're ready to get started, but now you're dependent on somebody else. Maybe you're a tier 1 or tier 2 supplier, and your supplier system hasn't come back up online yet. So, what do you do when that happens? And then, we really want to have a discussion about what you're most concerned about over maybe this next 6 to 9 months. What do you see happening? How is it impacting your operations, and how is it impacting your workforce? And what we can do to maybe talk through and help you with some of those ideas during this session today. So hopefully that all makes sense to everybody. Switch the slides again here. So really, if you start to think about it, I'll kind of start this discussion. What operational challenges have you experienced while ramping up production, or ramping up your operations, or getting people back to the office? I don't like to use the term getting people back to work, because most people have been working from home. It's really getting people back to work. So maybe you've had to notify your suppliers and they weren't ready. Maybe you've ensured your equipment and machines are ready to go, but then because they've been shut down for 3 weeks, you weren't ready to go. You notified your customers and you brought back your workers. And then what happened, right? What happened? What was unexpected that happened? So Chuck, do you want to kind of chime in here with some initial thoughts, and then as people have questions or find that unmute button, we can take some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, and good afternoon, all. One of the interesting things about it, and one of the privileges that Ken and I have, is that we get to get into the groundworks with our clients. And many of the engagements that we have and experiences with our clients over the many, many years, we've seen ups and downs with the economy. We've seen consolidation, bankruptcies, et cetera, et cetera. But I can tell you, in the 40 years that I've been doing this, I've never gone through a pandemic. So when we try to advise our clients about what to do, and they're panicked, right? Because all of a sudden operations are shut down, the revenue's not coming in, they've got bills to pay, they've got employees that are concerned, not only for their health and of their family and themselves, but for their jobs. And so now you've got this large amount of tension that's going on. Well, then we went through that period where certainly if the, being Michigan, being the auto industry, they were shut off for 6-8 weeks. Well, now you've got this big machine that you've got to get turned back on. And I was directly involved with 3 suppliers, 2 tier 2s and 1 tier 1, that had to go from basically 110% of capacity to 0, and then start back up again while bringing all their employees back. Well, no one had done this before. Now, we've had strikes, but nothing to the point where not only when we brought our employees back were we concerned about actual output, but now we had to be very, very concerned about safety and the spreading of the pandemic. So when you take a look at this large animal now that you've got to bite one at a time, right? Yeah, it's one thing to have your suppliers start shipping you material. Oh, by the way, if they're a non-essential business, they were shut down also. But more importantly, your machines have been shut off for 4 months, especially when you're in heavy machinery style business. You've got startup issues, alignment issues, et cetera, et cetera. But your customers, being, let's use the example of the auto industry, and if you say you were a tier 1 or even a tier 2, now you've got communication going from the OEM, who can't tell you exactly when they're going to start, to your tier 1, which is saying, I need your material a week in advance before the tier 1 expects to start production. Now you've got to get your workers brought back. And this is to where Ken's point. These employees have been laid off, or really the term was furloughed during this time period. And they're receiving a $600 stipend from the federal government to help them financially with their bills, and certainly a great policy and procedure. But if you're a tier 2, your pay rate for your production workers probably isn't as high as the amount of money that they were receiving from the federal government in stipend. How do you address that? How do you tell your employees, hey, come back to work and take a pay cut? And and as I mentioned to you when I first started speaking, is that we had 3 suppliers to the auto industry that had to go through this issue. Well, I had an incremental expense associated to putting PPE or protection equipment into my facility. I had incremental issues getting supplies of raw material and parts for my machines because the suppliers were shut down. But now I've got the bigger issue of I've got to convince my employees to come back. And it took at least 30 days before they really got a baseline as to what they needed. Now, Ken mentioned this before. We want this to be interactive. And we'd like to hear from you as to the trials and tribulations that your company went through when you launched up. So please, as Ken mentioned, raise your hand. Let's hear from you. And let's try to share best practices, because I'll bet you that you learned a lot by trying to start your company up, as we learned a lot by trying to start our own company up. Because one thing that Ken didn't mention is that we have 52 offices at EDSI, and I was leading up the effort to get the 52 offices opened. I got to tell you, I'm still dealing with it because we've had offices open and close and open and close. So please raise your hand, give us your input, and we'd love to hear from you.
So if you have a issue that you've dealt with that we can share, can you enter it into either the chat or the Q&A, or if you want to take yourself off of mute and introduce yourself, that would be great.
This is Delaney, just reminding our attendees that you can actually raise your hand at the bottom of your screen. There's a little hand emoji. And so if you raise your hand, some of our folks behind the scenes can give you permission to actually speak. Because I know in talking to our members, obviously it's been incredibly tumultuous. And I think you hit on a really good point there, Chuck. that, you know, there may be this impression that there are two phases, either you're open or you're not. And it's actually been back and forth for a lot of folks, open, not so open, sort of working remotely. There's been a lot of different phases for a lot of folks, and we're not out of the woods yet.
Delaney, to that point, I'll give you our example of us opening and closing, and maybe that'll start the conversation. I have never done this before, and our CEO came to me because I'm probably the most experienced operational person in the company from a global standpoint. We have some great people, but no one's got that background of doing this stuff, and being as old as I am, and I think that has a lot to do with just age. And he said to me, he goes, look, would you lead the effort to get our offices ready to reopen? And I told him point blank, I said, you know, I've never done this before. We're going to make mistakes. And he goes, look, we understand mistakes are going to be made, but we have to put the best effort across, one, and two, more than anything else, we have to keep our employees safe. And so err on the side of safety with virtually everything that you do. Okay, great. So the first thing we did was we tried to figure out what the CDC was trying to get us to do. And that was an adventure in itself, because the CDC kept changing the rules and regulations as they learned. And I get it. They weren't dealing with a pandemic to this magnitude before either. They didn't know how to do it. The World Health Organization didn't know what to do. And now you've got a guy like me who's never done this before, and I suspect that many of the companies went through the same thing. So what did we do? We broke it down into very simple tasks. We knew we had to have the offices safe. Okay, what are the rules and regulations to keep that office safe? What do we have to do with hand sanitizer, with cleaning solutions? The second portion of it was, how do we train our employees to deal with this type of a sanitary area? What do they have to do? How do they have to act? What do they have to tell us about their own health? While we're dealing with HIPAA, right? Because HIPAA rule says we can't divulge what diseases there be. The third and probably the most cumbersome thing that we had to figure out is, how do we buy all the PPE equipment necessary to open 52 offices? Do we let the offices buy their own? Well, the equipment's on short supply. We finally made the decision that corporate was going to buy all the PPE, and then we were going to send it out to the offices as they request for their opening. And we did so because we could put a dedicated team looking all over the world for the PPE equipment that we needed. Now, here's an interesting scenario with this. How much money has been spent on PPE that was never placed in the corporate budgets?
I'm sure it's an extraordinary amount.
Look what Ford and General Motors did, trying to start assembly plants by putting plastic shielding between each one of the work cells. It was monumental, both the effort, the dedication, and the cost. No one's done this before. So this is the reason why we wanted to have this open forum, because we'd like to learn from the participants in the forum. Tell us what you did. Tell us how it worked. Tell us what didn't work. We can share best practices together as a group and improve all the companies that are on the call here today.
So Chuck, earlier, yeah, Delaney had mentioned my extensive travel that I normally do, getting around all the different states, and quite abruptly on March 12th, I was more or less kicked off of Delta Airlines and told not to come back for a while. Not by Delta Airlines, mind you, but by our own company. You know, and that's an operational, that's an operational change that we actually made, you know, deliberately, that our corporate leadership decided that, you know, we were going to take everybody off the road. Nobody was going to travel. And the primary thing was there is to keep people safe, of course, you know, our own employees safe, and a secondary, you know, if there's any spread of this virus, that, you know, that would also be a secondary. But, you know, the whole focus of that was really primarily to say, hey, listen, we're going to keep our employees safe. Somebody's got to make this decision. and this is what we're going to do. And if you remember, Chuck, at the same time, we happen to be partnering on a project with McKinsey and Company in New York City. So I was actually traveling in and out of New York City every week for several months. And McKinsey made the same operational decision we did. They said, we're pulling all of our people off the road, all of our 20,000 consultants off the road, and we're going to figure out a different way, which was to go virtual and remote. Now, it's kind of an extreme example for our manufacturing friends here, because they don't often have that opportunity. If you're building a part and you're making a part, you still have to show up to do that. But those are operational decisions that we didn't necessarily have the answer how we would go to step 2 before we made the decision on step 1 to pull folks off the road. So that's another thought that we had around EDSI and some of our clients. Even the client in New Jersey and New York that we were advising at the time, shortly after we made our decision, they made their decision to shut down their operations as well. A little bit interesting that they were delayed, but then we quickly transitioned working with them to a focus on how can we work virtually and remotely and help them get back up to some level of normalcy so they can continue their operations. And obviously, those organizations, they have a large, where they require people to be in a facility to do the work. So, task 1, like you alluded to, is to figure out how to get them safe, right? And how to, put the PPE in place, put the testing in place. Our client in New Jersey and New York was real quick to putting testing on the docket to get all of their employees tested. They have 12,000 employees they needed to get tested and retested and continuous tested to ensure that they can continue their operations. So that's just another operational challenge that they had to deal with.
Moving people in and out of a building is an operation. And we actually had to do research on the technology that could be used to assist us in moving the people and moving our participants in and out of the building, because in our business, a portion of our business works with individual people looking to be replaced into the workforce and to be trained. And therefore, they must come in and out of a building and meet with client managers, et cetera, on a regular basis. So how do we get them in and out of a building when they're safe, with masks on, and understanding if they are susceptible, one of the people who may be carrying the virus? So what we did was we went and looked at the technology that was available. And unbeknownst to us, there is a series of machines that, maybe this was part of the creativity, that you actually stand in front of, like a tablet, and you get your picture taken. It does your temperature check. It sees if you have a mask on. And if all of those things are confirmed within the boundaries that we establish for them, you're allowed entrance into the building. Technology. One of the wonderful things that's come out of this, and I hate to say that having these many people ill is a wonderful thing, because that's not really true. As a matter of fact, it's the farthest thing from true. But what came out of this was that technology jumped in immediately. And what can be done to expedite? I mean, Ken talks about the advent and the addition of testing. Well, now they've got potential new testing that can be done within 15 minutes. So with every tragedy, there is somewhat of a silver lining, not a gold lining, but a silver lining. And new businesses were created. One of them here in Michigan, directly related to building these panels. So, there are trials and tribulations that we're going through. It's going to continue. And one of the questions that Ken put across to you is, where do you see our business going between now and the end of the year? And what's going to happen in the first quarter next year? What's that new norm? Is it standing in front of a screen like we're doing today and being concerned about what color shirt I have on because the backdrop may not look good? Is it that one thing that we miss is in a society, shaking someone's hand or giving them that warm embrace, that just to say, hey, I appreciate you? Those are the things that I can tell you that our company is dealing with from a psychological level with our employees. They miss being in front of each other. Has
Absolutely.
anybody else felt that?
So we do have a comment.
Yeah.
So the comment from Joe Murray, thank you, Joe. We found understanding what the proper procedures should be was extremely time consuming. Absolutely. How to determine if our office area had too many people. We benchmark large grocery stores for this. Masks or no masks. How do we enforce this? How to make MS Teams a functional part of our operation to minimize face-to-face meetings. The list goes on and on. That's a great point. You know, the square footage of your facility, you know, what are the procedures, the entry procedures into a facility, right? Do you do temperature checks at the front door with all of your employees? You know, do you ask them the magic questions, right? Have you been exposed to somebody that has been exposed? You know, I think there's 3, you know, questions that we keep asking ourselves. You know, and do you require masks of all of your employees in the facility? I think that's been a big one. And that's also been one that we've struggled. You know, I just posted a question in the chat box. If you could indicate if your company does require all your employees to wear masks while they're in the facility, you know, if you can just type in the chat box, if you do require that, that would be great.
Hey, Ken, let's talk about that one for just a moment, because it is a very, very important point. When we put our policy in place, we had to create our own COVID-19 policy for our company. And we have offices through 13 states. So every governor's got their own opinion, including the state of Michigan. Now we needed a corporate policy for all, because we believe in a very simple philosophy that everyone is treated the same. So we took the very conservative approach and said everybody had to wear a mask, and you had to have those masks on unless you were taking some substance, lunch, a coffee, etc. But immediately upon completing that, the mask had to go back on. And Joe, to your comment, we got some real significant feedback from our employees. The masks were too warm. They got in my way. If I'm in my office, do I have to have a mask on? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we did was we said, one rule for all, masks are to be worn, only can be removed when you're taking substance. That's it. Now, the governors helped us, right? Because many of the governors turned around and said, if you're in a public place, it is now mandatory by executive order that a mask be worn. But there still are states that do not have that requirement. So great points, Joe. And we went through this. And I'll tell you the one thing that I think that you hit on more than anything else is that we started from no knowledge. We had to learn. We had to find every technical expert we could get. And the one thing that we avoided was watching the news. We felt that opinions are like noses. And the only noses we were going to listen to were the WHO, the CDC, and a certified medical professional in this business. And that is what caused us more problems than anything else, because our employees were watching the news. And every news reporter had a slightly different take on a medical report. That makes it makes it very difficult. So Joe, you're absolutely accurate that we went through it ourselves.
We have another comment from Jillian. I'm curious how other manufacturing companies have responded to an employee testing positive for COVID at their facility. Aside from having any other employee who has direct contact with that person go into self-quarantine, what other actions did they take? Was everyone at that person's shift required to self-quarantine? Did they shut down to fully sanitize the building before allowing employees back? And did they contract an outside company to do this?
I got 2 examples, Ken, if you don't mind. One of them was one of our clients. One of their workers contracted the disease, came in the morning, went through the temperature check because they actually copied our protocol and put it into their protocol. Plagiarism is the finest form of flattery. I can assure you, I copied ours from Lear's playbook, which was probably the most perfect document I've ever seen. But we copied it and they copied it.
I think.
I'm sorry?
I think it's called borrowing brilliance.
No, I just think it's plagiarism, and I'm happy to admit that I did it.
Flat out
Okay?
theft, huh?
All right, I'm okay with that. So here's what happened. The employee came in, they took his temperature. He was feeling fine, you know, temperature was a little elevated, but certainly within the temperature restriction. I think it's 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Came in about 10 o'clock in the morning, he's just feeling terrible. So his supervisor immediately notified the human resource department that he had an employee that he was sending home, okay? The person, they highly recommended that this person go get tested right away, go see their medical professional, all right? This person was tested that day, asked not to come back to the office until such time that they had results, either positive or negative, okay? And the team immediately segregated the area that this person was working in. They cleaned the entire area. Any individual who had direct contact with that person in the morning was asked to go home and to quarantine and or get tested. If they got clearance after they're tested after 3 days, they were allowed to come back in. No one else caught the disease. The person was COVID positive, okay? And they had, it's in their policy that they must get doctor's clearance before they come back in. The other example that I have is Ford Motor Company. And we read this one because we were interested in how they handled it. They had a line worker working very closely with her peers who contracted the disease. Those individuals were all quarantined and all tested by Ford. The Ford line was shut down. They brought a professional crew in to sanitize the area, and then they restarted the line. And I guess they were shut down for about 8 hours. And all 3 of the 5 or 6 people that this person worked with all tested positive. So I hope that just gives you some examples of 2 different avenues that can be taken. But I can assure you that the companies that I have spoken to have taken this extremely seriously, and that their policies and procedures are in writing, and that everyone is trained on what to do when a situation like this occurs. And we highly recommend, if this is not being done in your company, that they do it. Because the one thing that we haven't mentioned in all of this is the potential litigation associated to having one of your employees contract the disease. And it still has not been solved by Congress. The exposure is there. The second stimulus package, which was supposed to be worked on, or is being worked on, there is part of a litigation resolution in there to help companies deal with the potential litigation of employees getting COVID.
Sure. And Chuck, if I could just build on to what you're saying there, we're also working on that front here at MMA, on the state front, trying to, if Congress is not going to enact liability protections, we're working on that here. We had a webinar just yesterday on it, and so folks can check out mifg.org to see a recording of that. But yeah, it's very important to make sure that you're protecting the Good Samaritans, the folks that are in good faith complying with state and federal guidelines and regulations. Making sure that there's not premises liability, making sure that there's not product liability. You know, we talked before about the fits and starts of your operations in a lot of instances. There may have been an impact on the quality of your product, and you want to make sure that there's protection there when it's all done in good faith.
Yeah, the problem with Delaney is, and this is from somebody who's been watching this closely, all right, because I have to from our company standpoint, right? All of the CDC instructions are recommendations. They are not mandates. And that's what causes the problem.
Sure.
You can pick and choose what you think are appropriate.
Yeah, even in Michigan where there is a mandate, where the governor's order is pretty clear, they can't cover every single aspect, and it doesn't speak to the liability. It's not very clear, and so when it's not clear, that means the court's got to figure it out, right?
Yeah, and then there's litigation costs, because even if you're right, you could get sued.
Yep.
But I think at least it's been my experience, and Ken, you can step in here too, that companies are taking this extremely seriously. I have not run into any of our clients that have not gone over the call of duty to make sure their employees are safe and protected.
Yeah, so there's and thank you for that, Chuck. And there's one company we work with on the western side of the state that I do know. They're a machining company. They're not that big, and most of their employees work in machining cells and operate 4 or 5 machines at one time. At the request of their employees, they asked if they could try not wearing masks in the facility as long as they were social distancing within their machining cell. And that worked for a little while until it became clear is you're still touching, you're still looking at controls, there's all kinds of things that you have to do as part of that work. They tried sanitization, but it just became such a very complex process, that they decided, they were going to go require masks. And I think, Jillian, to the other part of your question as well, I haven't necessarily seen companies that, decide to clean the whole facility. Typically, they've cleaned that area or that production area where that employee was assigned or has been. Always the restrooms, when they find an employee that has been infected, always the restrooms. Most of the companies that we've been working with have removed the tables and chairs from their cafeterias. Many of them have actually removed the vending machines. They're encouraging employees to get out of the building to eat and stuff. So, any opportunity for them to congregate, they really tried to minimize just the opportunity to do that. We're not clear, and sometimes some of the solutions to those, if you take away the coffee machine, what happens? But they've done a lot of that. Joe's got another question for us. Do your organizations pay for testing of suspected COVID-19 employees, or have the employees find testing? It's a really good question. So I think some of the larger organizations, they probably have access to testing, but I know some of the smaller organizations, even our organization, and Chuck, you know this better than I would, I'd assume if we have a suspected employee that may have COVID-19 or thinks they may have it, we send them to the clinic to get tested. Who pays for that?
That's a really great question, Ken. It is not written in our policy, okay, which was probably a mistake, but the company is being very generous in making sure that people have what they need, and we believe that being tested is something they need. So EDSI has stepped up, and we are paying for those individuals who believe they need to be tested. We also have a very good medical program for the employees. We have a policy that we put into place about quarantining. We're giving our employees the opportunity, if they are quarantined, and oh, by the way, I was quarantined for 14 days, and Ken knows that because my wife was COVID positive. But I was given the option to work from home, which all our employees are being given that opportunity. So, and they can use, their time off if necessary. Okay. Now I have to tell you that working from home has caused its own issues. I have what is known as 4-wall syndrome, and so I'm learning a new norm, right? And Joe, think about it for a second. We're going to pay to have somebody tested, or they're going to volunteer to be quarantined for 14 days. What do you want to do? You want to be stuck in the house for 14 days? we've been stuck in the house now since the first week in March. I got to tell you, I'm sick of it. But yeah, EDSI is stepping up and paying for that testing. The vast majority of our clients are paying for the testing. It's not that expensive, and it's a good investment. It speaks to the culture of the company and its leadership. If you're truly interested in the well-being of your employees, this is one of those easy decisions.
Yeah, our big client in New York that I was working with before the pandemic started, they paid for all 12,000 of their employees to get tested, and they brought testing on site as well. So it cost them a bit of money, but they did do that. And it largely, you know, a product of being in New York, and largely a product of making sure that their employees felt comfortable about that. Hey, Chuck, can we talk a little bit about, I know you've been dealing with this too, is as we're opening up our offices, and I know we're not going to full staffing capacity at any of our offices right now. It's more of a, you know, limited capacity. How are we deciding who gets to go to work in the office and who doesn't get to go to work in the office? And as school started up this week in some locations, and starting, you know, in through after Labor Day, you know, how are we addressing, you know, the concerns of the parents that work for EDSI, and, you know, and maybe having to homeschool their kids and potentially try and get back to work?
Ken, I can't tell you that there is any more difficult decision than that one that's going on right now. EDSI is a very culture-driven company. We respect and honor our employees, and that's just not words, that's our culture. So since we normally survey our employees, you know, every 6 months, and we've done that for years and years and years. Well, when the pandemic hit, we started surveying our employees almost immediately and getting their take on, did they want to come back to work? Did they feel comfortable coming back to work? Are they concerned about their families if they come back to work? And our normal work age, you know, Ken and I happen to be a couple of the old dogs in the company, right? And I'm probably the oldest dog. But the vast majority of our employees are millennials, and they have children, young children, and they had to pull them out of daycare because of the shutdown. So now their children are back in the house, and now we want to say to the parents, you got to come back to work. Well, Ken, to your point, now we have daycare issues. We have situation where I come back to work and I catch COVID, I bring it back into the house. Well, that's a problem. So in our surveys, when we first did the survey, the first survey, it was 70% of the people want to come back to the office. 30% did not want to come back. In the last, I would say the last survey that we did, which was probably a month ago, 75% of the people don't want to come back to the office. And in fact, we have such a low turnover rate, right, in our company. It's under 3% annually. We had 7 people of the 800 resign last week. And the exit interview stated, we're concerned that we might have to come back to work, that we might have to go into the office. So as a culture-driven company and an employee-conscious company, we've done everything we possibly can to allow our employees to work remotely. Much like Ford and General Motors just announced, said that they told their salaried employees, don't plan on coming back to the office until sometime into the first quarter. We don't anticipate at this point having any more than skeleton crews in our offices, the ones that we're actually opening, all right, for at least 6 months. Corporate headquarters is a great example. We normally have 60 people in corporate. I was there on Thursday. There were 3 people there. So it is an issue. And until there's a vaccine or a remedy, I'm not sure psychologically people are going to be comfortable coming into the office. But I'll put this question out to our participants. Would they go back into the office? Do they want to go back? Do they feel safe being back? We'd like to hear from you, because we're only one example.
So feel free to
Our
type in.
attendees are kind of, developing their thoughts here. I can tell you our approach here at this organization. We do have a few folks that are working on site, and I can tell you right now, it looks like a virtual office, but I'm in my real office behind that screen. There's a few of us who voluntarily decided to come in. Our employer, the Michigan Manufacturers Association, was very, very clear about the policies that they were putting in place, that they were, there are a couple of our team members who can't complete their work remotely. When you're talking about a building coordinator, that needs to be done on site. Some folks don't have internet at home and don't have that option. So we had a couple that were here. So we continued and enhanced all of our safety and cleaning protocol. We put practices in place, expectations on the organization for what we were going to provide, and then expectations on the individuals, what was expected of you, the procedures for wearing masks in common areas, wiping off your own workspace, making sure that you're observing those things. And I think that after we put those in place, we actually saw, I would say about a third, we're a fairly small employer, a little over 20 employees, about a third of our employees have voluntarily come back, much like me, who I felt, I'm more productive here in my office. I've got all of my tools at my disposal here as compared to my home office. And I think making sure that people feel safe and secure, and that transparency and understanding what it is you're doing to keep them safe really goes a long way towards that. But I'd be interested to hear from others that are participating, what's going on in their areas.
So Joe's figured out how to use the chat feature.
Thank you, Joe.
So Joe says manufacturing sites have a much harder time not being on site. And that's agreed, and that's a challenge. Supporting the production team requires that we be available. So that's absolutely true. Maybe Joe, have you done anything to maybe stagger shifts or maybe thin out the workforce from time to time? Trying to do both with social distancing and safety. See if he types in a message there. You can also use the Q&A button that's at the top of your screen if anybody would like to comment in there if you can't find the chat button.
There's a couple options for your Q&A. You can enter in the chat, or you can hit the little hand emoji that will allow you to raise your hand, and that'll help folks behind the scenes give you permission to actually just chat with us.
Yeah.
So Joe, if you'd rather speak,
don't raise your hand.
Then type. We'd love to hear from you.
There's a lot of things that are being done, but it's the psychological aspect that is really becoming the biggest issue. I was talking about our survey, and I want to bring this one that's pretty funny. The last survey that we had is like 75% that didn't want to come back, they wanted to work remotely. There was 5% of the people that said, I have to go back, the kids are driving me nuts. And I thought to myself for a second, it was like when we were talking to our talent team leadership who are really controlling the surveys, I said, I could see how having 7- and 8-year-olds running around the house all day long while you're trying to work would be very difficult. And it would be time consuming and be tiring. And it's got to be difficult on the children that they can't go outside and play with their friends. So now you become the entertainer while you're the worker. There's one other element to this, Delaney, you brought up about productivity. And I don't know if Joe's responded yet or not, Ken. You can interrupt me if he has. Our productivity went up the first 8 weeks of basically working from home. Our productivity has fallen off in the last 6 weeks because I think there's a psychological effect of being away from everyone. And again, I'm not a psychologist here, and I don't even play one on TV, but there is an impact of being constrained within the 4 walls and not being a social animal as we are. And I think that has had an impact on our productivity from a company standpoint.
Yeah, Joe's mentioned that they spread out their people all over the building to maintain their social distancing. And then they use MS Teams, which I would assume internally, even if they're in the same building, to avoid in-person meetings, which is definitely a smart move and something we've seen from a lot of our other customers. And I'll agree with you too, Chuck. I think at the beginning there was a lot of talk and press about the productivity spike from people working at home and just working probably longer hours or less socialing at the office than they would have normally done. But now, several months later, that's starting to wear. And I think you're right. We're starting to see, I don't know if it's a decline in productivity or a leveling off to maybe what it normally would have been, at least in the professional staffs. But I do see that. I know, Delaney, we're coming up to about 10 minutes on time here.
About 10 minutes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of also talk about what it maybe this next 6 to 9 months look like, and some of the things that we're hearing from our clients and really it's, initially I think when this first started, everybody was in a short-term mindset, right? We're going to knock this thing down. If we shut down for 2 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, nobody goes anywhere, the virus won't have any place to go, and this is all just going to take care of itself. And now really what we're seeing with a lot of our clients, and we're starting to advise our clients on, what are the long-term planning options that you have? What can you do? Even being a manufacturing facility, the organization that we work in New Jersey is New Jersey Transit, that operates the bus and train systems that go in and out of New York City and all across New Jersey. And obviously, if you don't have frontline people operating the equipment and maintaining the equipment, you're not going to have any opportunity for riders to go anywhere. And while they did see a ridership decline initially when this happened because they shut down, their ridership is back up to about 70% of their normal level, which means that they've got thousands of people coming in contact with customers every day, that they have to be in maintenance facilities, maintaining equipment every single day. And at the same time, New Jersey Transit headquarters building is still shut down. They're operating a skeleton crew. Normally there's 1,500 people that work in that building, and they got, 10 people in an 8-story building that are working there right now. So they've got this balance that they have to make. And really where they are today is really this long-term plan, and they're not planning for 6 months, they're planning for 12 months. And even if public policy were to change tomorrow and that they could maybe do something different and open up different, they've decided that, we just really need to plan for 12 months and figure out a plan that we can communicate well, not only to each of their employees, so their employees can plan around their lives, childcare, schooling, all that kind of stuff, but also plan around, let their customers plan, so everybody knows what really is going to happen over the next 12 months and that they can, really make a plan. So even more locally, when we're advising our manufacturing firms, that's what we're doing is we're saying, hey, listen, come up with a plan, forget about the public policy, forget about, whether or not the governor is going to let you do something or not let you do something. Take what you know today and what we've learned over the past several months and put a good plan together that's going to work for you, and then start to communicate that to your employees, because that'll address what Chuck was talking about, is kind of the mental aspect of this. Humans aren't necessarily built for just short term. We like to be social, and we like to know what's going to happen next most of the time. And right now we don't often know what's happening next. So that's a big piece of our advice right now to our manufacturing clients, is to look at it from the long term, and then you can tell everybody, including your customers, what you plan and can do. If that means limited production, that's what that means. And now you can talk to your banks and your creditors about what that means to them, and your labor unions about what that means to them. So, whatever you can do to long-term plan is really one of the better aspects.
Ken, one of the things that to add on to that point, we believe in our practice, and certainly our restructuring practice, that cash is king. And as a result, to your point, Ken, we are highly recommending and have been recommending to our clients to conserve their cash. If you don't need that building, don't open it. If you can get out of the lease, get out of the lease. Let's not plan on economic growth. Let's plan on sustainability. let's plan on a situation where things just might get worse before they get better. And I don't know, and I don't know that there's an economist that knows where this economy is going to go. They all know that between now and first quarter next year, it's going to look just like it is today. And they don't know if it'll turn and go down in the first quarter or go back up in the first quarter. So cash is king. Hoard your cash. That's your sustainability at this point.
Thanks, Chuck. So we've got just a few minutes left. If there's any questions or comments that somebody would like to log a question in the question and answer box or throw in another comment, we got a few minutes left to respond.
Ken, I'll just mention, if it's all right, I think that, when you're talking about the next 6 to 9 months, I think that's a real good, it seems like a medium ground. I think people are having difficulty with the everyday slogging through and just getting through what I got to get through today. And then there's some anxiety when you're thinking longer term, which is totally, nobody's got their crystal ball. We have no idea how long this is going to be. But 6 to 9 months is far enough out that it's feasible to expect what's going on there. And you can see beyond this fishbowl of what you're stuck in every day. So I think that's a good suggestion there.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Delaney, if I had a crystal ball,
I'd like to borrow it.
It would be blank, because it's so cloudy. We've got an election going on. We've got a pandemic going on. There's still 10.6% unemployment. Who knows?
And it depends on what industry you're in. I know EDSI serves manufacturing sector, but other sectors as well. And it seems like, I've heard economists speak of parallel recoveries and recovering at different rates depending on what sector you're in. So we're not just talking about one crystal ball, we're talking about several.
Excuse me for interrupting, but think about the travel industry. Ken got booted off of Delta Airlines and he alone subsidized the airline for the last 20 years.
They miss you, Ken.
They do.
I'm not sure I miss them, but okay.
So imagine, to your point, Delaney, the hotel industry, the cruise ship industry, airline industry, those people who are in commercial real estate, because if companies figure out that they can operate in the new norm by having people work from home, why do they need commercial buildings?
Yeah.
Unless they're in manufacturing, they don't.
Sure.
So the economy is going to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And, I want to encourage our attendees, you've still got a couple of minutes here. We're going to start wrapping up in about 1 minute, but please feel free to share your thoughts, any suggestions, any closing thoughts here through the Q&A, through the chat, or you can raise your hand using the little hand emoji. I would like to thank you, Ken Mall and Chuck Mouranie of EDSI. I think this is, these are perplexing problems that everyone is suffering through. And I know that you have got a wealth of experience across all of your offices nationally. And I want to make sure that our attendees are aware of your contact information. They can, if you all are like me, may not have a question right now, but we'll wake up at 2 in the morning thinking, oh, I wanted to ask that one question. So in your event program, you will find Chuck and Ken's direct contact information. Go to pages 90 to 94. That event program's got a whole lot of information, and it includes some additional information directly from Ken and from Chuck and their contact information. So you can reach out to them and get their thoughts as you're moving forward and as we're navigating this new horizon.
Great.
Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
Keep smiling. One of the privileges that age has is that we've seen a lot of things over the years, and there's always been one thing that's in common. It ends. Recessions end, pandemics will end, trials and tribulations end, and we know that there's a brighter side. So keep smiling because you know it's coming.
Yep. Yep. Keep working towards it. We'll get there.
Yep. As my grandmother said, this too shall pass.
That's right.
Grandma was smart.
So on that note, I thank you both so very much. And thanks to all of you who participated. Thanks to Joe for being so interactive and sharing your thoughts and experiences with us. We are entering our last break of the day. We've got 10-minute break before we come back for our closing panel. And I hope you're all planning to stay for that. It's going to be a really riveting discussion between some leading manufacturers, Firebolt Group and Integrated Packaging Machinery, Michigan manufacturers, and sharing their perspectives and being facilitated by Raymond. So we will all be meeting back in room 1. So make sure you go back to that, your unique connection link that you received from Sarah Martin via Seminar Web, and we will see you there at 2:40.